You know, when you picture the American Wild West, there's one name you just can't escape: Jesse James. He is, without a doubt, one of the most iconic and mythologized figures in all of American history. But here's the thing: the story you think you know, that's probably not even half of the real story.
So who was this guy really? Was he some kind of hero, fighting for the little guy, or was he actually one of America's first domestic terrorists? That's the big question we're going to tackle today, and let me tell you, the answer is way more complicated and a lot more chilling than the legend lets on.
On one hand, you've got the legend, the noble outlaw, the champion of the defeated South. But the reality? Well, the history books paint a very different picture. They show us a man forged in the absolute brutality of war, who honestly never stopped fighting it. A pro-slavery guerrilla who mastered the art of terror, and, maybe even more importantly, the art of public relations.
Okay, to really get who Jesse James was, you have to forget about the train robberies for a minute. His story doesn't start there. It starts way earlier, in the bloody, chaotic mess of the American Civil War. This is where the boy died and the killer was born.
So Jesse grew up in a pro-slavery family in Missouri, a state that was just tearing itself apart. His older brother Frank goes off to join the Confederacy, and soon after, Union militias show up at their farm. They weren't there to talk. They tortured his family, nearly killing his stepfather. For a teenage Jesse, that was it. That was the breaking point. The very next year, at just 16 years old, he joined a notorious band of Confederate guerrillas.
And he didn't just join the regular army. No. He signed up with the Bushwhackers. And these guys, they were a different breed. They weren't soldiers in the way you'd think. They were all about savage, hit-and-run attacks. They didn't take prisoners, and they were feared all across Missouri for their sheer brutality. A kind of brutality that Jesse James would learn, and then perfect.
And this brings us to one of the absolute darkest days of the Civil War, the Centralia Massacre. This moment shows you exactly what kind of violence Jesse was a part of from the very beginning. His units stopped a train, they pulled 24 unarmed Union soldiers off of it, and they executed every single one of them. Later that day, when Union troops came after them, the guerrillas ambushed and slaughtered over 100 more. And Jesse James himself, he's said to have personally killed their commander.
So, the Civil War officially ends in 1865. But for Jesse James and his buddies, the war, it never really stopped. They just changed who they were aiming at. They took all those skills they learned in guerrilla warfare, ambush, terror, pure violence, and they turned them into a brand new criminal enterprise.
Their first big move was robbing a bank in Liberty, Missouri. But you have to understand, this wasn't just about the 60,000 bucks. This bank was run by former Union militia officers. So for Jesse and his gang, this wasn't just a robbery. It was a political act. It was the war just continued.
And the violence just kept escalating. During another bank robbery, Jesse shot and killed the cashier, a man named Captain John Sheets. And why? Because he thought Sheets was the Union officer who had killed his old guerrilla leader, Bloody Bill Anderson. He wasn't just robbing. He was still fighting the Civil War, settling old scores in cold blood. It's around this time that the legendary James Younger gang really starts to take shape. And it was basically a reunion of former Confederate guerrillas. These men weren't just partners in crime, they were brothers in arms, all bound together by their wartime ideology and this deep, burning hatred for the Union government.
Eventually, banks started getting tougher to hit, so the gang made a pretty smart pivot. They started going after railroads. And again, this was a calculated move. Trains weren't just loaded with cash, they were these massive, powerful symbols of northern industry, pushing down into the South. For the gang, robbing a train was like ambushing a Union supply line all over again.
All right, so you've got this brutal gang of ex-Confederates robbing and killing their way across the country. How in the world does that guy become a folk hero? This right here is the real secret to the Jesse James legend. It wasn't just built with bullets, it was built with ink. Let me introduce you to the man behind the myth, John Newman Edwards. He was a fellow Confederate veteran, but he was also a newspaper editor. And Edwards basically became Jesse's personal spin doctor. He saw Jesse as this perfect symbol of defiant Southern pride, and he used his newspaper to craft an entire legend around him. So Jesse would write these letters to Edwards, who would then publish them for everyone to read. And the way he talks about himself is just incredible. He's not saying, yeah, I'm a criminal. He's comparing himself to Napoleon and Alexander the Great. He's literally rebranding himself as this grand, rebellious figure fighting against a corrupt government.
They had a system, and it was brilliant. Step 1, the gang commits a crime. Step 2, Jesse writes a public letter justifying it as some kind of political act. Step 3, Edwards publishes the letter painting Jesse as a hero to all the angry ex-Confederates out there. They were, in effect, controlling their own media narrative, turning terrorism into political theater.
But here's the thing about a legend built on violence and media spin: it can only last for so long. The gang's reputation for being invincible was about to come to a very sudden, very bloody, and very catastrophic end, all because of one bad decision.
The gang decided to rob a bank way up in Northfield, Minnesota, deep in what they saw as enemy territory. They targeted the bank specifically because of its ties to Republican politicians, but they totally underestimated the town. The people of Northfield fought back. They grabbed their own guns and just opened fire. Within minutes, the street was a war zone. By the time the smoke cleared, the gang was shattered, its members either dead or captured. Only the James brothers managed to escape.
Jesse tried to rebuild his crew, but the magic was gone. His new gang was different. You see, the original guys were loyal to the Confederate cause. These new recruits, they were just criminals. They were in it for the money, not for some ideology. Jesse got paranoid, started trusting no one, and you know what? He had good reason to.
After years and years of outrunning the law, it wasn't a sheriff that brought him down. It wasn't a detective. It was greed. A new member of his own gang, a guy named Robert Ford, secretly cut a deal with the governor. He'd get a full pardon and the $10,000 reward on Jesse's head.
So on April 3rd, 1882, Jesse is at home with the Ford brothers. He feels safe, so he takes off his pistols and gets on a chair to dust a picture. And in that one moment of vulnerability, Robert Ford pulls his gun and shoots the unarmed Jesse James in the back of the head. There was no final gunfight, no blaze of glory, just a quiet, cowardly betrayal in his own living room.
So Jesse James the man was dead, but Jesse James the legend? Oh, that was just getting started. So how did this pro-slavery terrorist ultimately become one of America's most romantic icons?
Well, first, let's just tear down the biggest part of the myth, the whole Robin Hood thing. It's a great story, right? He stole from the rich and gave to the poor. But it's pure fiction. There's absolutely zero historical evidence that Jesse James ever gave a single dollar of his stolen money to any poor farmers. The only people he made rich were himself, his family, and his gang. So the legend we have today is really this potent cocktail. Sure, it's partly based on the real audacity of his crimes, but it's been overwhelmingly fueled by John Edwards' propaganda, then by all the romantic dime novels that came out after he died, and eventually by a whole century of Hollywood movies that just like the exciting myth more than the ugly truth.
And all of this leaves us with one last really big question. And it's not really about Jesse James, it's about us. Why do we as a culture seem to have this powerful need to romanticize figures like him, to turn cold-blooded killers into misunderstood heroes? It's a question that I think reveals as much about our own stories as it does about his.